Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy, your academic counselor, and I welcome you to my session. Today we will deal with the course code BEGC-112, which is titled English Literature Early 20th Century. So in our last session we discussed Sons and Lovers, which is a very popular novel, a modernist novel written by d.h.Lawrence. So today we will focus our attention towards yet another interesting novel titled Mrs. Dalloway. So this particular novel is written by Virginia Woolf. You must have heard of Virginia Woolf, right? She is a well-known English writer and she is considered as one of the most important modernist 20th century authors. Another important aspect is that she is a pioneer in the use of the stream of consciousness technique. So in this particular lecture, we will be discussing the stream of consciousness technique in detail. We will discuss the life and works of Virginia Woolf. I'll give you an overview, the summary, important characters, the main themes and concerns in this particular novel, Mrs. Dalloway. And in a separate session, we will discuss the textual analysis, the basic critical aspects involved in Mrs. Dalloway. So that will be how this session will be structured. Firstly, I'll give you an overview regarding the stream of consciousness technique. Stream of consciousness is indeed a narrative style. So in this particular style, the writer tries to capture a character's thought process in a very realistic way. So it is an interior monologue more or less, but it's also more than that. That is, a stream of connected thoughts are presented. The writer might present one thought at a moment and then this would switch to another thought, and hence a stream of consciousness is employed in such a technique. So it is very common in the modernist novels of people such as Virginia Woolf. Another pioneer is James Joyce. It is also seen in some works by Dorothy Richardson. So the stream of consciousness is characterized by, as I mentioned, a flow of thoughts and images which may not always appear to have a coherent structure or cohesion. Okay, it may not always make a very logical connection, but it is a very popular technique used by the modernist writers of the early 20th century. So in this particular novel that we are about to discuss also, we see very significant presence of stream of consciousness. So before moving on to the novel as such, we will discuss the life and works of Virginia Woolf. So this falls as part of Unit 10 of your study material. So about her life, she was born in UK in the year 1882. Her father was also a very famous English writer. His name was Leslie Stephen. He was a famous English thinker and writer of those times. So at the age of 30, Virginia Woolf got married. The interesting fact is that she married yet another thinker and writer. Do you know his name? His name is Leonard Woolf. So he was quite famous and was a person of repute at that time. So apart from writing fiction, Virginia Woolf took up the cause of women's freedom and assertion and a thinker in her own right. So she advocated for feminism in her own means. She also stood for the cause of women's freedom and assertion. So if you look at the major works by Virginia Woolf, they include Jacob's Room, published in the year 1922, Mrs. Dalloway, the work that we will be studying in detail, published in the year 1925. Yet another important work is To the Lighthouse, published in the year 1927. There is Orlando, which is a work published in 1928. Another work published in the year 1932 is titled The Waves. So in books such as The Common Reader and A Room of One's Own, she comments on social and literary issues. She was a constant advocate who spoke for women and also on social and literary issues of those times. She died in the year 1941. So when you look at Virginia Woolf in the role of a writer, we can understand that she was one of the pioneers of the stream of consciousness trend. What do you mean by pioneer? One of the early practitioners of stream of consciousness trend. Who were the other notable literary figures who practiced this technique? They include James Joyce and, as I mentioned, a few others also. So when you look at the characteristic features of Virginia Woolf's writing, we can understand that her literary approach was non-linear. Yes, because she follows the stream of consciousness technique. So be aware of these aspects. It should be like Virginia Woolf's approach was non-linear, fragmentary and impressionistic in nature. Yet another interesting fact is that she never followed the conventional episodic structure in her writings, and this is absent in most of her novels. Her fiction follows a pattern, less depiction. That is, it doesn't follow a particular pattern, and all her works contain unexpected twists and turns, and they also investigate the grey areas of experience. Likewise, dialogues and statements are mixed with other forms of expression such as monologue, daydreaming, fantasy, etc. You should also remember that Virginia Woolf experimented with images, poses and sudden breaks. All these are the modernist features that are present in Virginia Woolf's writing, the characteristic features of her work. So when you have a close look at the life of Virginia Woolf, we understand that she is associated closely with three things. Which are these three things? We already have an idea of these three. 1. Modernism. 2. Stream of consciousness. And 3. Feminism. You should have an idea regarding these three aspects whenever they ask you a question. Very probably there will be an essay question on Mrs. Dalloway. So you can write all these as part of the introduction. You never know, maybe they'll ask you a separate question on modernistic features or some stream of consciousness technique as such. So that is one aspect that I find very important from this particular unit, the stream of consciousness technique. We will deal with that in a separate session if we get time, or else please read that. Okay, stream of consciousness technique could be a short question for your examination. Okay, mark that and study. Another interesting aspect about Virginia Woolf is that she was part of the Bloomsbury group. So you must be wondering what this group is, right? Yes. So at around 1920, Virginia and her sister Vanessa, both were children of Leslie Stephen, they along with their husbands, namely Leonard Woolf and Cliff Bell, they joined the group and took part in its running with interest. So this group was actually modeled around the ideals of their father, who Leslie Stephen, he was a passionate seeker of truth. So this company, that is this group, later became known as the Memoir Club also, literally making it a get-together of past memories in human form. Alright, so they were joined by their friends also. These friends include popular figures such as E.M. Forster, John Maynard, then Desmond and Dolly McCarthy and others. So we can say that this group in a way or the other influenced Virginia Woolf in writing her works such as Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. So Bloomsbury group is also an important aspect in Woolf's life. So we discussed her personality as a writer. Her role involved interpreting the 20th century situation as a woman who was equipped with the knowledge of the mental processes. And her participation as a member of the Bloomsbury group helped her remain unaffected by the predetermined goals of easy access. Alright? Yes, that would serve as a brief introduction. Right now, I'll help you out with an overview of this particular novel. For that matter, it is important for you to have an understanding regarding the summary of the work. So let's have a quick discussion on the plot of this particular novel. This narrative begins and ends with Clarissa. Who's Clarissa? She is none other than Clarissa Dalloway, the protagonist of this particular novel. So this very novel begins and ends with the protagonist as it details a day in her life. This entire novel revolves around one particular day in her life. So who is Clarissa Dalloway? She is a disillusioned socialite whose mood fluctuates, which means at some moments in life or at some moments in this particular day she seems very happy, and at other moments she seems to be very sad or slightly depressed. We can also say that her overall affect suggests suppressed symptoms of depression. So this particular novel begins with Clarissa's preparation to buy a flower. Why is that so? It is because she is about to organize a party that particular evening. This very opening sentence is also important. This has been discussed in the study material also. We will come to that in course of time. So once she gets back home, her former lover Peter arrives and these two meet once again and they start to speak. They have a conversation and it becomes clear that they still have strong feelings for each other. They were good old lovers and now also they realize they are very fond of each other. So in a moment of vulnerability, the lover Peter asks Clarissa if she is happy. But we don't know what she would have said because before that they got interrupted by another character, Elizabeth. Do you know who that is? Elizabeth is Clarissa's daughter. Then the perspectives switch. Remember, this is a stream of consciousness technique employed novel and the perspectives keep on changing as well. Remember, the novel's narration is a third person omniscient narration that we see in Mrs. Dalloway. So initially we had the perspective of Clarissa, later it switches and the narrator inhabits this Septimus Warren Smith, who is another important character in this particular novel. Who was he? He was a World War I veteran, but he has an issue. What is that? He got shell shocked from the horrors of the war. Okay, but today we can identify this particular condition as PTSD. What do you mean by PTSD? It is something that we studied last year as part of BPCS 186. I remember teaching you PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. So this particular person, yes, good that you people remember. So Septimus must have had such bad experiences that keeps on haunting him throughout his life, and as part of that maybe he must be experiencing this PTSD. So he's waiting with his wife Lucretia. Why is he waiting? He wants to see a psychiatrist, and the name of the psychiatrist is also very important, Sir William Bradshaw. He is also an important character here. So we are informed that, we the readers are informed that Septimus has been suffering greatly since returning from the war, and his suffering is something the other characters are unable to grasp, but we understand, okay, thanks to the narration. Now once again the perspective shifts. Firstly it was Clarissa, then it was Septimus, and now the perspective shifts to Richard. Do you know who Richard is? He is Clarissa's husband. So he is so fond of Clarissa and he loves her so much. But the issue is he finds himself unable to verbalize his feelings. All he can do is to give her a flower and nothing more than that. Nevertheless, Clarissa acknowledges that she respects the differences between them, and it gives both of them freedom and independence, while also relieving them of paying attention to certain aspects in life. Then again the perspective shifts. Now it gets back to Septimus. Remember Septimus, the one who is feeling PTSD? Yes. So now the perspective shifts back to Septimus, and he has been told that he is to be taken to a psychiatric hospital because he faces such PTSD, stress related issues. So Septimus would rather die than see himself in such a place. He won't ever go to a psychiatric asylum. Okay. Then once again the narration switches to Clarissa's perspective. Remember I told you it opens and closes with Clarissa's perspective. Yes, so we are nearing the end. So the narration switches to Clarissa's perspective, and now it is time for the party. Remember initially the very opening sentence told us that she is about to go to buy flowers. That was for the party, right? So this party is about to take place, and Clarissa is concerned with entertaining the guests. Okay, Sir William Bradshaw arrives with his wife. Who's William? The doctor. Okay, so he announces that Septimus has killed himself. That was a shocking news. Remember Septimus, the one facing PTSD? Yes. So the doctor came and told everybody that he had killed himself. So if we look at Clarissa's reaction, she was annoyed at first. Why was she annoyed? She was annoyed because Mrs. Bradshaw would discuss such a topic at a party. Okay, that more or less spoiled the mood of the party, right? So she was firstly annoyed. Later she also started to think about this situation. So in a small room by herself, she identifies. Who identifies? Clarissa Dalloway identifies with how overwhelmed Septimus must have felt. She began to identify herself with his feeling. She respects him for choosing death over compromising the integrity of the soul by allowing it to be confined. She feels respect towards him. So in the light of what he did to preserve his soul, she feels ashamed of the ways she has compromised her own soul in order to go on living. She realizes that she has more or less made many compromises in life. Okay. After that, she returns to the party and her thoughts came to rest, maybe. Yes, she had very many waves of thoughts in mind. After that, she was feeling better, and thereafter she returned to the party. So this is what is explained in the various chapters in this particular novel, Mrs. Dalloway. Now let's have a look at the main characters in this particular novel. Firstly, Clarissa Dalloway. She is undoubtedly the protagonist of this novel. Why is that so? It is because this entire novel revolves around a single day in her life. The novel begins with Clarissa's point of view and follows her perspective more closely than any of the other characters in this novel. About her character, she is vivacious and she cares a great deal about what people think of her. She is also self-reflective. Throughout the day, she reflects on the crucial summer when she chose to marry her husband. Who's the husband? Richard. Okay. And why is she having such a thought? Because she felt like she married Richard instead of her friend Peter, right? Yes, Peter Walsh. He's the person whom I mentioned as of a lover. He is mentioned as of a friend towards whom she had a love interest in the past. Though she is happy with Richard, she is not entirely certain she made the wrong choice about Peter. Discussing Richard, before discussing Richard, we will have a look at the most important character apart from Clarissa, Septimus Warren Smith. As I told you, he is a World War I veteran and he suffers from shell shock. When you write for your examination, you should write shell shock. That is the key term. Maybe you can write it is something which is similar to the modern day PTSD also. But you must mention this shell shock. So he is married to an Italian woman and her name is Lucrezia. And about his characteristics, he views English society in a similar way as Clarissa does, and he struggles like Clarissa too. Why are they struggling? To maintain their privacy and to fulfill the need to communicate with others. In that way, we can say that he shares so many traits with Clarissa. About his physical characteristics, it is said that Septimus is pale, he has a hoe-like posture, abby overcoat, etc. So you can have all such readings. Then we will discuss Peter Walsh. Peter Walsh is the close friend of Clarissa, once desperately in love with her. So she rejected Peter's marriage proposal when she was 18 years old. Alright, and he moved to India. And he has not been to London for a long time, say 5 years I think. About his characteristic features, he is very critical of others. And he often faces conflict about everything in his life. And one interesting thing is that he cries easily and he frequently has romantic problems with women. And he is at present in love with Daisy, who is a married woman in India. About his physical appearance, he wears rimmed glasses and a bow tie. And it's said that he used to be a socialist also. Now let's discuss Richard Dalloway. As you know, he is Clarissa's husband. An important aspect is that he is a member of parliament in the conservative government. He is a sportsman. He is a sportsman and likes being in the country. He is a loving father to Elizabeth and also a very caring husband. We should also discuss Elizabeth Dalloway. Who is she? She is the daughter of Clarissa and Richard, the one and only child. About her characteristic features, she is very gentle, considerate, and she is 17 years old. It is said that she has a dark beauty that is beginning to attract attention. And one person to whom she shares close bond is with Miss Kilman. So now let's move on to Miss Kilman. Doris Kilman. She is Elizabeth's history teacher who has German ancestry. And she is over 40 years of age and she wears an attractive coat. Another interesting thing is that even if Elizabeth spends a great deal of time with Kilman, she is quite doubtful regarding her nature. That is also something to keep in mind. Then there is Sir William Bradshaw. He is a London-based psychiatrist. It is towards him that Septimus goes for consultation. So when Lucretia seeks help for her insane husband, who's that Septimus, it is Dr. Holmes, another doctor, who recommends this particular doctor, Bradshaw, and it is he who found that Septimus has suffered a complete nervous breakdown, and it is he who recommended that he should be admitted in a psychiatry ward. Then there is Dr. Holmes. He is a general practitioner. Yeah, we mentioned him before also. There is Sally Seton. She is a close friend of Clarissa and Peter in their youth. Okay, just keep that in mind. There is another friend, Lady Bruton. She is a member of high society and a friend of the Dalloways. Miss Helena is there. She is often referred to as Aunt Helena. She is Clarissa's aunt. There is Clarissa's cousin. His name is Ellie Henderson. There is Evans, who is Septimus' part-time officer. Mrs. Filmer is there, the Smith's neighbor. Then I mentioned that Peter has a lover in India. Yes, her name is Daisy Simons. Yes, there are a few other minor characters also. You can read about them if you are interested. Now, there are a lot of themes that are discussed directly and indirectly throughout the text. Let's have a quick look at some of the most important themes. Firstly, the disillusionment with the British Empire. Your study material also elaborates on this particular aspect. We will discuss that in course of time. The fear of death, thoughts of death lurk constantly throughout Mrs. Dalloway, this particular novel. You know the case with Septimus, that is also very much relevant. The threat of oppression. Oppression is a constant threat for Clarissa and Septimus throughout the novel. Who are the two main oppressors in this novel? Miss Kilman and Sir William Bradshaw. Okay. Then there are a few other themes. Here the sea is seen as if a symbolic aspect of life. The sea is seen as if a symbol of life. There is the intersection of time and timelessness, through which Woolf creates a new novelistic structure in this particular novel. Social commentary. Didn't I mention that Virginia Woolf is greatly interested in making a social commentary? That is also seen in this particular novel. So right now let's have a look at some of the major details to be kept in mind with respect to this particular novel.